So you wanna be a picture book writer, then you gotta write picture books. And you're gonna need a bucket load of bright ideas for titles, plots, and hooks. If you're partial to prose or you're raring to rhyme, then repeat after me. It's a challenge, but I'm gonna tackle each story 1 month at a time with 12 by 12.
This is the manuscript that landed on Talia's desk, and I had also added an author's note with a little bit of back matter about compound words, and we'll come back to that in a bit. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Talia to talk about what happened when you read this manuscript and what made you decide to acquire it.
Sure. So, that was all I have to just say. Very fascinating for me because I don't think I've ever gotten the full backstory and laid out like that. So I was just interested to hear that. But in terms of why I wanted to acquire it, I think there were a few things that in that process. I think I said earlier that, when we acquire a book, we meaning any editor, need to have it fit at the very least 2 large buckets. One is that it resonates with us closely. I said we are the champions of the books that are on our list, and I truly mean that. But what that means is that we have to live with them for a very long time. It's a 2-year process, start to finish, at least. So I have to love it enough to live with it for that long. And I also have to show that the numbers are going to line up, that it is a good business decision to acquire a book and to, that I think it will sell, X number of copies, and therefore I can pay X amount for it and so on. And so this book just did check both of those buckets for me. And, in terms of what I loved about it, first of all, the cadence of forget the wordplay for a second, just the way the words flowed really stuck in my head. And it made me think a lot about Go Dog Go, actually, which was one of my favorites from when I was a kid. So that was, it was just sort of a book that stuck in my head and wouldn't get out. And that's a good sign to me. So that was one thing. And then the wordplay itself, which I love. I'm a sucker for wordplay all the way. I think in general, what I tend to look for in books that I acquire are books that can inspire and empower and help readers understand the world around them. And I think humor and wordplay is an amazing way to do that because humor is by its very nature subversive. It's a thing that makes you go, like that's not what I thought was about to happen here. And that can expand your mind in a really fun and interesting way. So I think that's great. And then I also just truly love the friendship angle. That was such a big part of it. And I think, when we talked earlier about launch and when we as editors present upcoming books to the rest of the division. And a big part of what we talk about at launch is the various hooks that a book has and the reasons that it will sell and that readers will love it. And wordplay is one hook and friendship is a whole other hook. And I think having all of that in the mix here made it so special for me. And luckily I had a boss who agreed because she has to approve it. And so that was sort of the start of the whole process.
Yeah. And I remember too that your boss, Jill Santopol, reached out to my agent and she said, my editor, who I think could really do a great job with this book, is out of town, but I want her to see it. So can you wait? And we were like, sure. But I wanted to stop there for a second because to me, even that part was interesting, that within a publisher, still different editors have strengths or books that they're going to do really well with. And so were you like the go-to editor for humor and wordplay? Is that why
I think so. I should say at this point, Philomel is just me and Jill, but at that point, we went through a bit of a reorganization. At that point, there were 5 editors of us. Not everybody does picture books, first of all. So that's thing number 1. But even within picture books, yeah, I think funny and wordplay are definitely things that I gravitate toward. And, I remember that conversation with Jill where she said to me, let's talk about this book. Like, what's your vision for it? Like, do you have a vision for it? Because she saw it and she basically was just like, I see something here, but I'm not sure what I would do with it. Do you know what you would do with it? And that's a big part of the consideration that an editor has to make when they're acquiring a book, especially a picture book that doesn't come with art included, because that's a huge component. And I think every author submits a, or agent submits a book knowing that there will be more editing done to it, that it's not coming to the editor in final form. And so the editor needs to know what that editing is going to look like. And if I think like Jill did, that, you know, something has potential, but I just don't really know how I'd manage it, then it's not the right book for me. But so for this one, I did have that vision, and I really connected with it. And so that was certainly part of the process of, you know, how it landed with me specifically.
Yeah. And I've saved a couple of the emails that you sent me initially, one of which was, every time I read this book, I laugh.
It's true.
You
Still true.
Now now that Talia's acquired the book, and I should say, because sometimes, you know, you'll get a revise and resubmit before you get a contract. But in the case of this book, you had the manuscript, we signed a contract. And so by the time I was getting the first editorial letter, the book was already under contract. And I imagine that's because you can answer this, Talia, but I imagine that's because you felt like the book was in enough good shape that you could tell that we would land.
Yeah,
that we would get into the place where you knew it would be okay.
I think that's spot on. I would say, you know, I would ask for a revise and resubmit in a situation where I see more of like an inkling of potential, but it's not quite as far along as I'd like. And I'm less confident in the author's ability to revise, or not less confident, but just, I don't know what, you know, if it's an author I haven't worked with, I don't know what their revising skills are like. And revising is a whole, I mean, as I'm sure you all know, is a whole different set of skills from writing in the first place. So if something just feels not quite as solid to me, I might ask for that. But in this case, I could see where it was and what you could do. And so I felt very confident in it.
So one thing, a lot of people ask me about speech bubbles and how to indicate them. And so I wanted to draw this out to you all. Talia's first comment here, where I have under colon, you know, just to check. Did you envision the speaker's names on each of these lines as actual text? Or is this just the indicator for the manuscript that will remove once the design makes it clear who's talking? And obviously I meant it as the latter, but this is just a note to remind you not to get too hung up on, you know, this is a speech bubble, because you want to make it clear who's speaking somehow. But ultimately, it is the design of the book and the illustrator who are going to make those decisions ultimately. And that will come up like immediately. And then the bigger change here was adding an is to all of these scenes where over and under are playing. And it never would have occurred to me that over, under would be hard for a young child to really understand, even though they're seeing the pictures, that you really do need that verb in there to help. And it gives them a second to just a second more to contemplate the picture. Over is over, under is over. And it's actually really hard to, even for me, to do this without using my hands. So the illustrations in the book really help here, but I thought that was definite. And so we agreed on that very quickly. So I had originally written this as doggone, like together as one word, thinking of it as an additional kind of compound wordplay kind of thing. Talia said here, worried about kid readers not necessarily understanding the joke, or even worse, reading this as a sentence that doesn't have proper grammar. So this became doggone, like dog is gone, right? And then again, the is, or in this case, adding a contraction made a big difference, because bear behind, bear between, bear behind. When you add that apostrophe S, which is brilliant. So like these are just really small things, but they make such a big difference. What Talia said and what is right is that can be read as bear is behind, but then in the end, it's also bears behind possessive. It could be either bears behind, but with the question mark, it's like, wait, why are we looking? Because bear is in front of them now. So we know it's not is. So it becomes possessive, and it actually plays even more into the humor and into the wordplay. Talia, I guess you may not even remember how you picked up on this. But I thought that was a particularly genius catch.
Well, thank you. I think in general, you and I have talked about this, but most of the edits that I made or suggested in this manuscript were, you had the wordplay there, and it was funny, and the humor was there, and the friendship story was there, the emotional component that you worked in so nicely. And what I wanted to make sure was that the humor didn't overshadow the storytelling, because I think especially for younger readers, not every joke will actually land with them, right? They don't necessarily understand every line of wordplay. So at the end of the day, though, this is still a story, and we want them to understand the story as it's being told. And so making sure that the story landed as a story first and foremost, and that the humor, while obviously intrinsic to telling the story, is there, it doesn't outweigh the story itself, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely.
And so that was my consideration throughout a lot of the notes that I made.
Do it together, so never you fear. It's a handy little way to help you kick into gear. You're amazing, exciting. Look out, 'cause you're writing 12 by 12.
12 manuscripts.
12 by 12.
12 picture books.
12 by 12